Well, it's been a while since we've done an alien rumor rundown. And like I've said all along, I wish this were all false. I wish this were all a lie. I wish there were good explanations to debunk FLIR, Gimbal, Go Fast, the Tic Tac, everything we've learned in the last half decade. I wish it would all just go away. I wish we could debunk it all tomorrow and rest assured there are no aliens, there are no alien craft, there are no bodies in the possession of any world government. I would be much happier in that kind of a reality, but it looks like things are just getting wilder and wilder. Okay, before we get into all of the details, and there have been a lot of details since the last time we talked, let's take inventory of where we are in the grander scheme of things. What about this whole does the government have UFOs and alien bodies thing? How about that? So I think this post from Jeremy Corbell kind of sums it all up. He says, an amendment passed today to get David Grush into a SCIF. You'll remember that's a sensitive, compartmentalized information facility. It's basically a room where no one can spy on you. An amendment passed to get Grush into a SCIF. With those, he testified to in Congress under oath at the public UFO hearing to spill the beans on the details he couldn't reveal in the hearing. We're talking UFO programs and names, UFO holding locations, list of hostile and non hostile witnesses, and all about the non human biologics. Remember, those were the pilots that David Grush talked about. So, what is this? You'll remember when we covered that hearing, there were a lot of questions. People on both sides of the aisle, all the way from Representative Burchett to Representative Ocasio Cortez. They had a lot of questions for David Grush, and he couldn't answer them. So, the problem, he was supposed to be able to give the hearing both in public and in the SCIF, but the House tried to book the SCIF so they could hear Grush giving them all the details. And the people who control access to the SCIF said he's retired from the military and from the various organizations he worked for. So he no longer has a security clearance. So Grush couldn't get into the SCIF. They wouldn't allow Grush inside the SCIF. Congress wasn't very satisfied with that. I think they could tell that there was a concerted effort to keep them from hearing the things that David Grush wanted to tell them. So they've now included an amendment, and you can see here Representative Burleson on the floor inserting that amendment along with a bunch of others, possibly included by definitely included by other members of Congress into the 2024 Treasury Department and White House spending bill. This is the bill that deals with Treasury, White House, federal judiciary, and DC spending. Corbell says it's a meeting that's been blocked, but now it looks like it's going to happen. It will undoubtedly lead to some subpoenas, which I think is good for those who need that extra layer of protection to spill the beans and come clean about America's UFO exploitation and reverse engineering programs. I have some individuals in mind. So remember, a lot of different members of Congress asked him questions like, where are these UFOs? And Grush said, I'll be happy to tell you in a SCIF. Who are some witnesses we can talk to? And he said, I'll be happy to give you a list of witnesses, both hostile and non-hostile. Let's just do it in a SCIF. They said, where are the bodies? Where are the alien bodies? Grush said, I'd be happy to tell you in a SCIF. I'll tell you exactly where to look. So I think what's going to happen eventually, if nothing happens to Grush, and hopefully that's not the case, but as long as Grush is around to testify in the SCIF, it looks like Congress is going to get him. They're going to do everything they can to get him into a SCIF, and he's going to start talking about locations of actual UFOs, actual alien bodies, and witnesses, both hostile and non hostile, including those who Grush says have firsthand knowledge, who've actually touched UFOs. This is going to be crazy. And the whole UAP, UFO, alien interested world has had ideas for years about where the alien bodies might be, where the craft might be. Are we talking about Dugway? Are we talking about Wright-Patterson Air Base? There are a lot of different candidates, and I'm sure Battelle, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, I'm sure the names that Grush is going to give to Congress aren't going to surprise people who've been paying attention to what the whole UFO world thinks the answers to those questions are already. But we're not necessarily going to hear because it's a skiff and this is sensitive, compartmentalized information. This is information that classified information that the public is not supposed to have. So we might have a situation where the members of the House who are allowed to be in the skiff when Grush is allowed to be in the skiff, they might get that information and we might not hear a thing. There's long been sort of suspicion that certain members of the Senate, especially, already have this information. They just can't tell us. So, what happens next after they get Grush in the skiff? I hope it's what Corbell is intimating here, that there will be a whole lot of subpoenas flying out to these hostile and non hostile witnesses, and probably some pretty tough questions put to the people in charge of these facilities, like the various Battelle facilities, Wright Patterson Air Base, Dugway. What comes next after all that? It's going to be interesting. I don't know what the answer is, but it's going to be interesting. While there are certain things we can't predict about the future, there are certain things we do know for sure are going to happen. Like Sean Kirkpatrick, the current head of AARO, is definitely stepping down. So we already saw reports online that Dr. Kirkpatrick's name was popping up as part of the staff of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which I understand to be run by Battelle. It's one of the Battelle facilities. This obviously implied that he would no longer be at AARO. And of course, the Department of Defense, I believe the Office of the Secretary of Defense, they immediately denied that there was any change to Dr. Kirkpatrick's employment with AARO. People also found, I believe, the name of a corporation that Dr. Kirkpatrick, or maybe it was an LLC, but some kind of corporate entity he had registered. So it was obvious maybe he was going to step down from AARO. The Department of Defense was kind of denying it. And then a couple days later, they announced that he was, in fact, stepping down, which is really interesting because as soon as it was announced that he was stepping down, he started sort of backtracking a little bit. He started saying, "Oh, well, we have investigated a lot of what a lot of what David Grush said, and some of the things are turning out to be true." Which is kind of exactly the opposite of the testimony he's given to Congress on a couple different occasions in the past, where he was unwilling to acknowledge that there was any evidence whatsoever of UAPs or aliens, basically. So that's what I would call sort of the roundup of what the anti-disclosure people have been up to, at least the ones we can see, pretty much just Kirkpatrick. Now let's talk about what the pro-disclosure UFO people have been up to. David Grush has had a pretty busy last week. He gave a really big interview to, I believe, this Italian organization, the Centro Ufologico Nazionale. And in the interview with these two gentlemen, he had a few really interesting clarifications to make. The first was in regard to a question: how many craft does the US government actually have? Grush's answer: it's in the double digits. This is pretty significant. The answer is not 8, it's not 9, it's not 5, it's not 2, it's double digits. Maybe more startling was this clarification. They asked him how many non human bodies have been recovered. Grush: leave it as double digit. Follow on questions: were they dead, alive? What are we talking about here? Grush says the bodies of the pilots came in various states and morphologies, size, shape, and structure being what people believe he's talking to about when he says morphologies. The states part is maybe more interesting. There's always been this kind of the way Grush has described the aliens. It's always sort of left open this possibility that there were dead bodies found and also possibly living aliens captured. These are two very different things, right? I mean, originally when we heard Grush talk about this, he talked about biological samples. There were biologics. Biologics were found. And then it became clear under questioning in the congressional hearing, he was actually talking about the bodies of pilots. So obviously, again, we've all known from the very start, he's been very upfront. He hasn't seen any of these things, but he's talked to a lot of people, witnesses who he says have seen these things. And apparently, what those witnesses told him was that there have been aliens discovered with these crafts, various different types of aliens, different sizes, shapes, structures, different morphologies, and maybe some of them were alive, maybe some of them were dead, different states. Are you ready to get even crazier? So, this is going to feel like deep conspiracy territory to some of you, but this is something that is commonly commonly categorized as truth in the UAP world, or a possible truth, or something where there seems to be enough rumblings that maybe it's true, something like that. So that's the question. Any information on secret US government treaties with any non-human intelligence? Grush's response: many believe that there was certainly, probably, an aspect of the program that dealt with active communication or interaction with a non-human intelligence. We've talked before on this channel about the long-held theory that a US president, pretended to have a toothache and then left his Palm Springs golf vacation to go meet up with a bunch of aliens at an Air Force base, which sounds like something crazy that wouldn't even be in a sci-fi movie, but maybe a sci-fi comedy movie. But this is something that's sort of made the rounds in the UFO community for decades and decades, as near as I can tell. And now Grush is saying the people he talked to, they seem to indicate there was some kind of communication going on between the U.S. government and aliens. I don't think we even need to use the euphemisms anymore. Non-human intelligence, aliens. This part is going to be pretty troubling for some people. So the interviewers asked Grush, do you know of any murders being committed to maintain the secrecy of this reverse engineering project? Grush said no, he didn't have personal knowledge, but of the 40 or so people he interviewed, 10 to 12 of them seemed to have concerns about, and it seemed like he was implying their own coworkers, like their own colleagues, either having been murdered or disappearing. People in their offices just suddenly disappearing or possibly being murdered. But he's definitely implying here that it sounds like a quarter of the 40 people he interviewed had concerns about murders having been committed or possibly committed to maintain the secrecy of this whole UFO program. So, if you've been comforting yourself by saying to yourself, this all couldn't possibly be true. If this were all true, why would the US government, why would parts of the US government, why would non governmental defense contractors, whoever are the keepers of these secrets, assuming these secrets exist, if you've been convincing yourself these secrets don't exist because it doesn't make any sense, why would those people fight so hard to keep this a secret? Would be one of the most monumental revelations in the history of humankind. Why would they fight so hard to keep it a secret? Well, if they've been murdering fellow Americans to keep this secret for the last 90, 80 years, maybe that's a good reason to keep it a secret even longer. Because if they've been murdering people, then they have a really good reason to not want Congress and the American public to find out about this. That could be a big part of explaining why they don't want all this to come out, why they don't want disclosure. Why would they? It's kind of a circular loop, though. Why would they murder those people in the first place? That's the part we don't know. And according to what people like Grush have said, it sounds like there's some pretty good reasons for that. There's some pretty big reasons why they don't want this information to come out. It sounds like it's not as simple as, hey, there are aliens and there are alien craft. Like Grush said, there's some baggage that comes along with the biologics in this case. And I think we've seen a lot of assertions that probably has a lot to do with the origin of humankind. And lately, we've seen even crazier stuff, implying that it may even have to do with sort of the fabric of reality. That maybe what we think about the fundamental physics that define our reality, maybe we have a very, very, very loose grasp on the relationship of the physics we believe are there and the actual nature of reality. Maybe these are things so fundamental to the human psyche, the nature of the universe, the nature of reality, the origin of humankind. Certainly, I can imagine some people back in the 1940s deciding that this would all be far too much for your average human. Let's just keep it a secret. Then maybe a bunch of murders happen. And now we're in this place in 2023 where the secret can't come out because people will go to jail. People will spend the rest of their lives in cages and they'd rather just keep the secret. So the problem is a lot of these witnesses that Grush seemed to have been describing have been percolating the surface, at least people who might be among the witnesses he's describing. Here's a post about Carl E. Nell, a recently retired Army colonel and current aerospace executive who was the Army's liaison for the UAP task force from 2021 to 2022. Probably somebody who knows something about this whole UAP topic. And here's the quote that's being attributed to him from the debrief clear back on June 5th, 2023, but I don't think it's got a lot of coverage. He said, and this is in reference to Grush, his assertion concerning the existence of a terrestrial arms race occurring sub rosa over the past 80 years, focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin, is fundamentally correct, as is the indisputable realization that at least some of these technologies of unknown origin derive from non-human intelligence. I think we're in this position where a lot of these people who Grush is referring to, I think a lot of people know who these people are. And some of these people have been, like I said, percolating to the surface. They've kind of been, dropping little quotes in the media, just like this one. But we can't quite formalize everything because everybody is under these non-disclosure requirements. This is all classified information. It can only be conveyed to people if they have the right clearances in a secure environment in one of these skiffs. But if they can get Grush into that skiff by this amendment they just included in the spending bill, then maybe Grush is going to spill all the names, all the locations, all the information. And then all of a sudden the subpoenas fly out and you get some of these witnesses in front of Congress and they're under subpoena. I think we're going to see a little more disclosure than we've seen in the past. Finally, if we're talking about UAPs and aliens, we might as well talk about some of the truly wild stuff in the news right now. So, you probably remember the events that have been happening in this village in Peru. There seem to be these maybe aliens, maybe something else, but these intruders coming into the village they're referring to as the face peelers. So this guy, Timothy Alberino, went down to this village, talked to the people in the area, including some people who claim to have been attacked by the face peelers. And he has some interesting things to say. He put a video on YouTube. You can find it. Just Google Timothy or just do a YouTube search for Timothy Alberino, Peru, aliens, anything like that. You'll find the video. Universally, all the people in the area keep describing the same thing. These tall intruders, let's call them intruders, wearing black armored bodysuits, elongated helmets with yellow tinted almond shaped eyes. They have backpacks. They ride around on these little disc platform things that seem to be able to float in the air. They also have spaceships. Interestingly, though, he included some footage of an interview he did with a girl who claimed to be attacked by two of these things. And she claimed they were both speaking Spanish, one with a gringo accent, one with a Peruvian accent. And it sounded like they applied some kind of a cream to her face, and then they attempted to use what sounded like some kind of a laser scalpel and something happened. She managed to scream, and some people, one of these things she claims had its hand over her mouth so she couldn't scream, and then something happened and she managed to get her mouth free and she screamed and people came and these things took off, but speaking Spanish the entire time. I believe she tried to push one of their helmets off, something like that. But truly wild. Normally, these are the kind of reports that exist, obviously, in the sort of alien UFO lore. There have always been stories like these, but it's pretty wild that right now, when all this disclosure is going down, we're seeing this whole village of people, not one person, not two people, but a whole village of people who claim they're being attacked, sort of constantly at night by these beings, and they all sort of describe them the same way. And of course, there are all kinds of explanations. Are these just guys using jetpacks? Is this some kind of military? Are these miners? Is this some kind of cartel activity? Nobody really knows, but it seems like based on what Timothy Alberino managed to uncover, it seems like there's definitely something going on down there. And it's very peculiar that such a high profile event like this would be going down right now at the same time that all of this crazy disclosure stuff's going down. I'm hoping we know a lot more. I don't know that we'll ever find out more about what's going on in this Peruvian village. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But I think in a year, we're going to know a whole lot more about this entire topic, this whole UAP, UFO, alien thing. I think we're going to know a lot more in a year than we know now. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.